You mentioned about not having like a huge budget in one of your roles. So how do you produce and get growth without budget? Because that's crazy, not having anything.
Well, I actually think it's in some ways easier now than it was, because I think I mean,
true though. Yeah,
these are brave words, but because I think that the advent of social media, I mean, the social media's been around for a long time, but you look at the ability to be able to, reach people with influencers. You don't need that much budget to back it up either in terms of the paid piece. Just being really creative. I think really having an eye for detail for things like that, like really looking at how can you drive performance with what you've got? Do you know what I mean? Drive reach with what you've got. So some of those like little technical things, like
that is pretty
make sure
amazing.
You've got amazing speed. Like the first thing I always look at is, are there any terrible no follows? Like if you look talking about a website or a D2C business or something. Remove, make sure that's clean. Make sure your speed is sorted. Make sure the whole kind of end-to-end funnel is really clean and
100%.
quick. All that optimization stuff, it's kind of boring, but very, very important.
People don't put enough into that conversion
SEO,
rate.
The poor relation of marketing, but my personal favourite. I love SEO.
I know you've mentioned it a bit. I love that. I want to pick your brains.
It's very misunderstood, I think, even now. And I think because we're moving away from a world where you divide up people by like geographies or even personas, and you look at behaviours, right? And behaviours can cross demographics. SEO, there's an enormous amount to learn from SEO, not so much SEO itself, but SEO thinking.
Yeah.
So
selling, right?
Yeah,
properly
I'm super interested in all of that. So all those kind of like brilliant basics, I suppose you call it. You've got to get that sorted, and then just think really creatively about how you put a personality. If you're in consumer, or to be honest, even in B2B, we need to be delivering consumer-like experiences as for B2B businesses. And I think if you do that and you create personality and you're consistent with it, and you don't need a lot of money to be able to do that stuff. So it's exciting.
If the average tenureship's 18 months, so you're going from role to role, how do you bring the team on board to your new way of thinking?
Like, not another one.
Yeah, there's another CMO coming in. Like how?
No, I feel.
And they all fear it. I do agree.
Well, I think I've always thought, and I know it's kind of making the same point in a different way, but being CMO, it's not just about the nuts and bolts of taking a brand to market. It's also about leadership. And then you have to think, well, what does leadership mean, right? I went on this amazing leadership course when I was at Pentland at Roffey Park Institute for Leadership. If anyone is interested, it's very good. I have absolutely no ties to them whatsoever, but it made a huge impression on me, because it made me realize leadership is a separate thing. And the way I kind of sort of reflected on it all during my doing that program was really what you want to do is you want to be the quietest person in the room. You're definitely not going to be the smartest. You can be when you get that team around you. So you've got to create the conditions where that team feels confident expressing themselves, for better or for worse, right? Remove the people who are going to hold them back, in time after the listening and observing, obviously. And just, you've got to be. I saw someone right the other day, actually, someone in a WhatsApp group, and they're like, she thinks of herself as like one of the backing singers. Do you know what I mean? That you're there to kind of, and I thought it was a brilliant analogy, because
that's so nice.
And to come back to your point, like when you do that, when you go, what that team is left with is the confidence to be able to speak up to the next CMO. They'll know how to organize themselves. They'll be really cohesive. And I like to think that at least in a couple of the places I work, that's what I left, because really you're not trying to build an empire for yourself. You're trying to build an operation that can stand alone and that can work in times of crisis. And anyone who was in that sort of senior role during COVID will know what that felt like. Do you know what I mean? Could you actually, sort of mothball websites, do the whole thing with half the people that you'd normally have because everyone was furloughed, all of that, and still deliver because you had that kind of culture in the team. So, yeah.
Agreed.
I think you mentioned during COVID you were in the warehouse.
Oh no!
Like helping out from time to time.
That was another role.
Oh, that was it.
I love that.
Where there was a COVID.
That was it. Yeah, COVID breakout.
Everyone got COVID, so we all had to go to the warehouse. during Black Friday to sort of pack boxes and, you know, all of that. But the thing is, I love a warehouse.
Yeah.
They're so interesting.
I haven't heard anyone say that before.
Oh my God. I really do enjoy the kind of mechanical side of like.
You're in the wrong job.
No, but it's the whole thing. You know, it's like from the kind of, you know, the consumer to the making the purchase to the system going to the warehouse management systems, the ERP, and then all the, you know, like it's so interesting. Obviously, when it goes wrong, it's painful in the extreme.
Out of the warehouse.
But it's those people. I always used to think like the guys working in the warehouse, they're like on the front line or customer service.
Yep.
You know, they're the ones that are like the emergency services of a business. And so it's in your interest to know them, to talk to them, to listen, to be on the calls, to spend time packing a box. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the thing, like knowing that detail makes you a better CMO or CCO or whatever the role is.
And how is customer service important with marketing? Because as we're approaching Black Friday, critical. Christmas, everyone's ramping up their customer service teams.
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, customer service is just, again, unsung heroes of the whole operation. True. Right? They're amazing. The stuff they have to deal with, the knowledge. So where customer service really plays into marketing is the feedback that a really good customer service rep will collect. Obviously, there's a lot of tech now that's collecting feedback and quality scores and NPS and all that stuff. But it's, you know, about once a quarter I used to try and go, when customer service was in my remit, and go and spend time in the customer service centre and just like obviously spend a few hours like listening to calls, but also talking to the people who are on the front line. And they know a lot, particularly if you're in a sort of you know, you're in a business where the products are quite technical, or they'll know more than anybody else about those products and what's going wrong and why it's going wrong. So it informs marketing, messaging, future product development.
They need to sit hand in hand, sales and marketing teams. But some businesses keep them so separate. I think there's still an opportunity of how you merge those closer together, because do you have some teams that you turn up and they're like, sales is here and marketing is here?
Yeah, I've definitely had that in roles. And again, I think if you're in a leadership position, your job is to bridge that gap.
Totally.
And to bring everyone together. And it can be really hard because sometimes culturally, you're just persona non grata. Especially if you're marketing, especially if you have a brand label but I think, you know, you can overcome those. A lot of it is just
same goal.
Spending time with people, having respect for the job that they do, you know, working with them to make changes. I mean, obviously, I make it sound like it's all sweetness and light. It's not, but you can make massive progress just, you know, just by, I don't know, being relatable, I suppose.
Yeah.
You know, and then your job is to take that away and translate it. I always think being a CMO or in that type of role, you know, I just did languages at university, so I always think of everything in terms of translating, you know, speaking the different language, the tech language, the sales language.
Love that.
You know, the consumer language, the B2B, and your job is to be that kind of multilingual kind of translator, and then to bring all of that together into something cohesive.
Just like a conductor.
Yeah, it is. It is about orchestration, but you have to be able to play a lot of the instruments as well. So.
Okay, so let's say you're coming into a CMO role.
Yeah.
What would be the first things you look at?
I always love to go, I'm a real because I come from such a kind of digital first background, I'm a real bottom up person. I always want to get under the hood of the performance, how things are performing. You want to see the you want to see the P&L. You want to actually live and breathe the experience of the consumer. So I always kind of go deep first, you know what I mean? Go right in.
Love that.
That's the first thing. The second thing is obviously you spend all your time meeting people, getting to know people, like I said earlier, the listening and the watching, and just the kind of synthesizing. And yeah, I think those are definitely the you know, it's kind of people and then detail, and then out of that will come. It's my method anyway. Is that's how you get the vision, and then the strategic piece, and obviously really bringing senior management with you. So, you know, you put a lot of yourself into those roles because it's, you know, hugely about people. The technical stuff is critical, you know, having the right tech stack, having the right analytics capabilities, the right product development, all of that. But unless you know where you're going, how can you possibly build that properly? So yeah.
But in the first few months of a CMO role, you're supposed to do quick changes, long-term strategies. So if you don't know the answer to a lot of things, or some things where you're expected to from the CEO or the owner, how do you find the answer?
What do you say?
How do you find the answer?
God, I feel like I'm in a job interview.
I know. Well, that's he interviews all day long.
I can't help it.
This can't be an interview. This is an interview.
But I always think about that.
You've got
there must be times.
Yeah, but you can't. I mean, my view is that it's a mistake to try and bullshit at that point.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Really, you just
some do though.
You sit and you have the conversation with the CEO or the CFO, and you set out what you're going to do. Do you know what I mean? How you're going to go about finding the answers. You give them a timeline, regular check-ins, regular chats. You want to know from them as well, right? What are the big obstacles in the way from their ultimates? Because obviously the CEO will have set, the kind of the overall strategic direction, and the marketing piece is one component of that strategic direction. So your job is to bring everybody with you and to partner with them. And they will know better than anyone that there's like a million problems in the business, because there always are. So it's not really about buying time per se. Of course, you can do, if you have a little bit of luck like I've had, where you can, find something tactical that you can change quite quickly, or then great. And also, again, to come back to the team, really often the teams will know, what's kind of where the bodies are buried, so to speak, and they'll know where the opportunities are for those tactical things to sort of make them happen quickly. So yeah, I think it's, there's no kind of smoking gun. I don't think it's and that's why culturally, senior people will always go on about culture, and that's why, because you need to be able to have those conversations, and if you can't, it's very difficult.
Yeah. And have you learned from all the cultures that you've been in? What have you taken from each one?
Oh God, that would take me a long time to summarize, I think. But you learn from every role, don't you? Even the ones that sort of maybe weren't what you'd hoped they'd be.
Spill the tea, Gemma.
No,
we all know in marketing, we're like, okay. But I mean...
but you never... I mean, the thing is, you've got to be able to, take the rough with the smooth, right? And it is a massive cliche, but it's true that it's the failures you learn from the most, or where things didn't go your way. And you don't always feel it in the immediate aftermath, or, when you move on from a role. But I've had such an amazing career so far. And there's no role that I regret, even though, they didn't all turn out to be what I'd hoped. Yeah. But I learned so much. And as long as you've still got that learning mentality, it's, I mean, it's just about, I think it's about being able to have a critical eye and synthesize ideas and bring that into the next place, is a big help if you're trying to, stay in the CMO game.
And what makes a good CMO, would you say?
Ooh.
I think the best CMOs that I know are the ones that can combine a really deep understanding of how to create authenticity in a brand with the performance element. And by performance, I don't mean performance marketing. I mean, really understanding how to deliver. So, laser focus on revenue, profitability,
commercial,
all the things that lead to that, but that it doesn't sort of take from the magic that can happen when you create something that people really connect with. There's not that many of those, I don't think, but yeah, that's I think what most CEOs want from their CMO. Yeah, and that might not. That's not just in consumer. Do you know what I mean? Obviously, I've worked consumer and B2B, and B2B is super interesting because that is. Those ambitions now you see in some B2B brands as well, So people like HubSpot, I think, have done an amazing job.
Agreed, they have.
There's a younger business called Pipedrive that I think is doing some really, really interesting things in the brand space.
They've also got amazing teams, right? Like some of them, this is fundamental.
Yeah, very smart, very sharp, very, agile as well. Very able to move fast. But always kind of, they don't, there's a lot of movement, but they're not. None of them lose sight of the ultimate destination, and that's the thing. I guess that's what strategy is. They've got good strategy.
So what about in this current market, right? I guess, I mean, we're talking about past, present, everything. What is something in terms of the biggest challenge you're finding? Whether that's in the difficulty of the role, rolling it out, like we've kind of talked a bit about it, but I guess what are you even in a marketing sense, are you finding it hard to shift to content strategy really quickly, or, you know, jumping into the role?
I think that, you know, obviously budgets are a challenge for a lot of businesses, right? So that, you know, on the face of it, that can kind of like really limit your options theoretically. I think one of the best things, this is not new news, but one of the best things that has happened in marketing is the metric of lifetime value to customer acquisition cost, so CAC to LTV, or LTV to CAC, as they say, because that changes the lens through which you can kind of build a case, right? But it still surprises me. There's a lot of businesses that still haven't sort of started. They're still thinking in terms of cost per acquisition, right?
Oh, I mean, I work with some that's still that.
And I think, yes, it is difficult, and it's you know, CPAs or CPCs or whatever are also really important, but
you've got to move towards it.
You've got to try to move over time towards something that helps you that gives you the space to be able to think a little bit more long term.
Agreed.
And if you can bring the CFO on that journey, and you can't just go in and demand it. I think that will help with some of the constraints. So that's a bit of a kind of boring KPI answer, but actually that unlocks more potential through channels and so on if you can do that.
And where brands are restricted all the budgets, how do you make a business case to get more budget when you need to invest it in certain areas for growth?
CAC to LTV.
It's hard, isn't it?
You know, if you're
I like that lifetime value. I think it's a good shout.
Well, if you're able to demonstrate that you understand the lifetime value, which is not straightforward, right? It needs some really, really good analysis. You understand the value that your channel mix or your projected channel mix is likely to bring.
Yep.
You understand then off the back of that the cost of acquiring a customer. As long as you can kind of get that, you agree the ratio.
True.
Of CAC to LTV with the board or whatever, then in theory, the money should be limitless, right? In theory, of course it's not, but I mean that's where, you know, the smarter businesses are really operating, and it just means that your growth you can then kind of throttle growth.
True, it helps you scale.
Depending on how that's performing. So that's the way, you know, I would be trying to argue for more budget if I could. Yeah.
I love it. In terms of, you said cutting costs, right? Where have you seen the costs? I mean, you know, they're talking about creative being a big one to UGC. Yeah. Where do you see the biggest, I guess, cut from internally client side?
So I think it's a mistake to cut creative, just to be clear.
Yeah.
You know, it depends on how you're doing your creative in the first place. I think creative agencies have an awful lot to bring to the table, but so I know I'm going off piece slightly, but there's a lot happening in the creative agency space where they're looking at how can we be more efficient. There's a lot of technology coming into that space to help them be more efficient. So I think, you know, I wouldn't be cutting there. I think people are being much more careful about the technology that they're investing in. So, you know, I don't know whether this is related, but, you know, a lot of the tech businesses have let people go over the last sort of 12, 18 months.
the MarTech stack is enormous that people have.
It's hugely competitive, that whole space. And I think people are really thinking about, well, am I actually using those tools?
Totally.
Like, I definitely have done that, you know, very recently. So I think, you know, the smart marketers are trying to just be really prudent with where they're investing in sort of tech or digital, leveraging, you know, the potential of you know, all the tools and capabilities that people like Google have to offer, or Facebook, or Meta, I should say. But I think try not to cut your creative.
I agree. You know? I mean, we offer creative right in our team, and we've had to change our approach in the last year because everyone has cut creative, which I totally get. There's elements where we've gone, okay, we're going to train you internally because stuff you can do off your phone. Agreed. Like for social media, there's elements, but for big brand pieces, you still need to have the experts. And that's not in-house because we've had, you know, my teams I built before was, okay, we'll build a creative team in-house, which is what we did, like in a client side. And then we realized, we actually don't have the the actual experts that are constantly telling us what's happening in the market. So like we missed a bit of that. But I think, yeah, you're right. Creative agencies are getting smarter for sure, and the technology and everything else. But the big fees you paid for 50 grand for a campaign, I think isn't the same as you were for,
No, I don't think so. I think what's interesting with Gen AI that I was speaking to someone this week about was at the moment it's not a mature area of technology in terms of application, right? We all have been told, oh my God, it's going to change the world. But I think where you're seeing it sort of affect creative and digital is some of those kind of lower level jobs, the kind of admin jobs. Yes, there's a push for efficiency, there's a push for productivity, and it can, like, we've all used like Gemini and ChatGPT, right? So we know how it can help us. And what's even in film, I was speaking to someone who works in film, and they were saying the same. Like, a lot of the stuff that happens behind the scenes is now already being done by Gen AI, and so one of the risks there is, as you take out some of those roles that more junior people might do now or back in the day, and then that's, who's going to do those jobs? Who's going to learn from the bottom up? Do you know what I mean? So that when they do become senior, they really understand how things work. Yeah. So I know that, again, I'm sort of digressing, but I think that's, yes, it's saving money, it's helping to cut budgets, but part of me wonders, is it a bit counterproductive?
You can't scale. I think there's a lot of elements where we'll cut a budget for a client and we're going to do that because, that's their budget they have. But then, okay, we might use some AI stuff in terms of integrating into Photoshop. Maybe it will help us with captions and all that. So it makes us faster. But we spend so much time going back and forth with edits, like we speak to the teams. We kind of end up making no money out of it, but we're like, you know what, we gave it a shot. But then the client ends up spending more in the end because they're like, actually, I want to change this, I want to do that. So it's an interesting thing. I think there's elements where, yes, maybe things should be done faster, but it should make, I guess, designers and everyone else better at their jobs. But I still think like 100K for a campaign is pretty crazy, unless it's like, there's going to be time back and forth. It's going to be across different markets, and like it's going across here and here. Then it makes sense. Yeah, but
I don't know. It's interesting as well, and the whole point around creativity is that a lot of what AI will do will be to democratize. It's a bit like tech. Back in the day, back like 10 years ago, it was incredibly expensive to build a really high-performing MarTech stack, right? It's much less. It's much more achievable now, right? With the advent of cloud and low-code, no-code, and it's much, much easier. So you've got this like massive democratization. I think Gen AI could do the same thing. So what are you left with, right? What you're left with is, how do you connect authentically with your customers or your consumers? And I would like to think that, for all that the models are being trained on, all the creative stuff out there in the world already, that humans still have a really important role to play there.
Oh, I mean, you can see it in LinkedIn, right? They kind of LinkedIn kind of died for a bit. Yeah. And it came back again, and now everyone's like, oh my God, some of my friends work there, and they're like, it's amazing, blah, blah, blah. But LinkedIn is all about, I guess, like, it's got your photo in it. It needs to be really personal. I think recently they removed the fact that you can celebrate your work. Like you can only, they just removed it.
What, celebrate like a new job?
You know how you put like new job. So instead it has to be someone doing a post that says, I've done my new job, and it's all about someone writing it personally rather than you can't just do I've changed my job title. Yeah. So they really want you to go in there, which is where the engagement happens. So LinkedIn's kind of gone with that, which I think is awesome for them. Yeah. But again, you can't, if you start doing any ChatGPT copy, everyone knows.
You can totally tell because it's the most boring vanilla copy.
I mean, I did it once, and then I was like,
emoji.
oh, well, this is
and
bad.
Then what's really funny is you can go back and go, do it in the tone of, you can give it a piece of your writing. But the problem is, it's like, by the time you've done that, you might as well have just written it yourself.
Exactly.
I know. I actually think sometimes I'm like, I should have written this myself. But I do use it sometimes because I'm like, get those juices. But now I'm like, I cannot use it for LinkedIn.
Daily.
Yeah, I mean, I agree.
Every day.
Do you?
I mean, I walked in here and everyone's using it.
What would you say is the most cost-effective tech tool?
Oh my God.
With the best ROI.
Do you know the question? What kind of question is that? That's like a super hard question.
He wants a solution. That's Jack.
Oh man.
Because people talk about different types of tech tools like CRM, analytics. People talk about Phosphor recently, and
I don't know. I mean, I still think. For bang for buck, and this is such a boring answer. I know we've just had a whole conversation about Gen AI, but I still think that email platforms and then the extension of that, customer data platforms, you get an incredible ROI from
segmentation.
Those, right?
Yeah,
even if you're looking at within a mix, you will get incredible value for money.
Hasn't it? Yeah.
But it always had like, one of the roles I had many years ago was at a company called eDialogue, which is now part of, I think, Epsilon, maybe, I'm not sure, but and even back then it was like the poor relation of marketing, but the ROIs in it were absolutely amazing.
Lost cousin or something.
Yeah. So I think let's not forget the SEOs and CRMs of the world, because and particularly then if you start to combine them. I tell you another one, sorry, it's all coming back to me now, is really thinking about paid search and SEO together.
It needs to be together.
Because and I'm sure I'm telling anyone who may or may not be listening to this what they already know, but you can massively improve your quality score if you have your paid search quality score.
It should be together.
SEO. But lots of people don't put the time in. So in the digital sense, I'd say SEO and maybe CRM. But again, amazing creative that lands is priceless, isn't it? So
I know.
One last question to end the podcast.
Yes.
So anyone who's aspiring to be a CMO, so maybe like a head of or a senior marketeer, what advice would you give them to get to the top?
I think, firstly, just enjoy the work that you're doing in front of you, because if you enjoy it, get your head down, just get on with the work, and results. It's a cliche, but results really do speak for themselves. Do you know what I mean?
That, yeah.
Find a niche or find an area. Like when I went into marketing, I'd love to tell you, some people kind of like design where they want to get to and work back from there and figure out where they should start. That didn't happen to me. I have a nose for innovation. I could see that the internet was going to be absolutely massive. So look for the thing that really sparks your imagination and go for that, and just really, really work hard. Mm-hmm. I also my second point would be the backing singer. Do you know what I mean?
I love that. Yeah.
I can't take credit for that at all.
I have to say.
But be the backing singer. Don't be like the front man or the front woman, because you won't get the best. And you're only one person. You're not actually going to change the world. It's everything that you bring together that will drive the change.
Some people say that you need to essentially, what is the word? Get yourself out of a job, pretty much. Like you pretty much run yourself out of a job, that your team can do such an amazing job for you that you shouldn't be so desperate to keep the job, because that's where fear is.
Totally. And just generally, I don't know if I'm allowed to, but just don't be a dick.
Yeah.
Like,
I know, but there's so many. It exists because there's fear a bit in marketing.
It's this fear and insecurity, and there's a feeling that you need to be very egotistical. But it's so nice. It's not, in my experience.
Have you guys been in a situation where you interview for your second and you think, bloody hell, those guys are too good?
I have had that happen to me. 3 times in my career that's happened to me, and you really have to go, right, come on, Gemma. Don't be a dick. Just hire them. They are better than you, and this is
that's
a good
the best
thing. And I can, I just, some of them will, I'll have to tell them about this afterwards. I'm still friends with them, and those people have become really good friends of mine.
I agree.
And made me better. So like, it's all
you should hire better than yourself.
Oh yeah.
My last hire on client side was instantly when I met him, I was like, oh my God. I think you hired him for me. Yeah. Did you ask that question on purpose?
I never. You asked yourself the question, then answer
True,
it.
but I literally. Also, Alex listening. I love Alex in my team as well. Yeah. For everyone on my team listening and editing this. But I also hired him, and I was like, whoa. And then I told my boss, he's going to take me out of a job. Yeah. Like, I'm happy about it. And he always made that quote. But I was like, sure, keep whatever. I loved it.
I love hearing that, because people do feel threatened, but they know it's the right decision. Oh. Like you said, it made you better as well. So.
Oh my God, because you learn so much
from them too.
From really smart, clever, innovative people, and you want them to go on and do well. And in the end, our careers, you don't know what direction your career is going to take. So why should you stand in the way of someone on their journey? That's kind of like my general attitude, and it's stood me in good stead so far.
I love that from you. Cool.